They called him Dracula in Cleats. It was Pittsburgh's Myron Cope who coined it, because only a monster can match the toughness of Jack Lambert. If you've been watching my videos, you've seen me talk about toughness, intimidation, and relentlessness. But when you combine all of them into one name, you get Jack Lambert. A linebacker who looked less like a football player and more like a villain ripped straight out of a nightmare. A wild, toothless grin that froze quarterbacks in their tracks, and eyes that carried the promise of violence. This wasn't just intimidation. This was Jack Lambert, the heart of the Steel Curtain, the linebacker who defined the Pittsburgh Steelers dynasty of the 1970s and early 80s. Today, we're digging into why Jack Lambert wasn't just tough. He was the most dominant linebacker in NFL history. Jack Lambert wasn't supposed to be a football legend. In fact, when he was born in 1952 in Montour, Ohio, nobody looked at the skinny kid and thought, future Hall of Famer. From the beginning, he was a very reserved and quiet child, you can say kind of awkward. At Crestwood High School, he didn't look like the monster he would one day become. He was tall, lanky, and by football standards, too light to play linebacker. Coaches didn't know what to do with him, but he lined up at quarterback and cornerback. He was so good that he was named All-League at cornerback and even won a state championship. And after all that, he still had time for baseball and basketball too. On the court, he averaged nearly 18 points and 13 rebounds a game. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. During a basketball practice, a teammate's head collided with Lambert's mouth, knocking out his 4 front teeth. Most would see that as a curse, and for a while he did too. His mother once said that after he lost his teeth, he refused to go to school until he got his new dentures. Later, for Jack, it became his trademark. He wore dentures in public, but on the football field he left them out. That toothless snarl would later become the defining image of the Pittsburgh Steelers defense in the 1970s. Jack made so much of an impact that Crestwood High eventually named their stadium after him, Jack Lambert Stadium. When college came, Lambert chose Kent State. He arrived as a skinny freshman, just 187 pounds, still searching for his true position. He tried quarterback, then defensive end, but head coach Don James noticed his true instincts and moved him to middle linebacker. That was the moment everything changed. That year, he led Kent State to its first ever MAC championship, and he was named both the conference's Defensive Player of the Year and the Tangerine Bowl MVP. By his senior year, he wore the captain's badge, earned first-team All-MAC honors twice, and stood out as one of the fiercest defenders in the country. Alongside future coaching legends like Nick Saban and Gary Pinkel, Lambert carved out a reputation as the meanest man on the field. The funny thing is, football wasn't his first dream. He once considered becoming a veterinarian, but destiny had other plans. But dreams never leave your side. After retirement, he traded the gridiron for the outdoors, serving as a deputy wildlife officer. In 1974, after a string of all-star games, the Pittsburgh Steelers took a chance on him in the second round of the NFL draft. At 6 foot 4 inches but barely 220 pounds, he didn't look the part of an NFL linebacker. But the world would soon realize Jack Lambert wasn't about looks. He was about impact. He had the instincts, the calculations, and the techniques that let him dominate opponents. He could see things others couldn't. The Pittsburgh Steelers didn't draft Jack Lambert to be a superstar. In 1974, they took him in the second round. The doubts were loud.
Jack Lambert in the second round. We did not have a third.
Because most thought he was too small, too light, and too fragile for the NFL. But Pittsburgh saw something different. Defensive coordinator Bud Carson was designing a system the league had never seen before. It would later become the foundation of the famous Tampa 2. Bud Carson's scheme wasn't just another playbook, it was a revolution. Traditionally, middle linebackers like Dick Butkus and Ray Nitschke lived close to the line of scrimmage, built to crush running backs head-on. By the way, we've covered Dick Butkus in detail too. The link's right at the top of your screen if you want to check that out later. But Carson's design was different. He asked his middle linebacker to drop deep to the open middle of the field, covering the space between the safeties. That meant reading quarterbacks, shadowing tight ends, and even chasing running backs out of the backfield. No one had asked a middle linebacker to do that before, and Lambert was made for it. His length, his speed, his instincts, it all fit perfectly. Lambert got the opportunity when the Steelers' starting middle linebacker Henry Davis went down with an injury and Lambert stepped in. From that moment, he hit the field. There was no going back. He didn't just dominate the moment, he owned the era. By the end of the season, he was the NFL's Defensive Rookie of the Year. Oh, and the Steelers won their first Super Bowl in franchise history. Lambert wasn't just a piece of that defense. He was its voice, its signal caller, its fury. Over the next decade, he led the team in tackles almost every season. He earned team MVP honors twice and set the standard for what Pittsburgh football truly meant. The legend grew in 1975. Joe Green, the cornerstone of the Steel Curtain, was battling injuries. The defense looked vulnerable, but Lambert refused to let the standard slip. In the AFC Championship against the Oakland Raiders, he was everywhere. He recovered a record 3 fumbles, flew sideline to sideline, and kept the dynasty alive. Then came Super Bowl X against the Dallas Cowboys. The Steelers were stumbling, down 10-7. Confidence was slipping.
Dracula just missed his second field goal. Now Lambert's walking by. Here's Harris telling him something and grabs the kicker.
Dallas safety Cliff Harris mocked kicker Roy Gorilla for missing a field goal. Most players would have let it slide, but it was Jack Lambert. He stormed in, grabbed Harris by the jersey, and tossed him to the turf in front of millions watching. No hesitation, no second thought. That was Lambert, the enforcer who made sure no one disrespected his team. Later, he talked about it.
I thought that was right on time, and I'm glad Lambert did that.
I think the message sent was thunderous. No one's going to intimidate any of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
From that moment, Pittsburgh flipped the script. They outscored Dallas 14-7 the rest of the way. Lambert finished the game with 14 tackles and another Super Bowl ring. Even on a team defined by intimidation, he stood out as the scariest presence. His teammates called him Jack Splat.
I can't believe it! Jack Splat is really gonna ride Kennywood's new Raging Rapids!
And guess who's coming with me, Myron?
Myron Cope had already crowned him Dracula in Cleats. To opposing offenses, he was simply their worst nightmare. Lambert spent 8 years as the Steelers' middle linebacker in the 4-3, then slid seamlessly inside when they moved to the 3-4. But through every change, he stayed the defensive quarterback, the heartbeat of the Steel Curtain. Even now, decades later, Lambert's shadow still looms. When James Debo Harrison, one of the fiercest linebackers of the modern era, was asked about his toughness, his answer circled right back to Lambert. And speaking of Debo, we've actually covered his story in full on this channel. If you haven't watched that yet, make sure you check it out after this one. Jack Lambert, 9 straight Pro Bowls, 8 All-Pro selections, NFL Defensive Player of the Year, and numbers that almost don't sound real. 1,479 tackles, 28 interceptions, more than 20 unofficial sacks. But stats only tell part of the story. The rest was in the fear he inspired and the violence he delivered. 1976 rolled in and the Steelers looked broken. Terry Bradshaw was hurt, Lynn Swann was hurt, starters were dropping everywhere. Pittsburgh stumbled to a 1-4 start. That's when Jack Lambert stepped into the spotlight. At a players-only meeting, he didn't sugarcoat it. He told his teammates straight, the only way we're going to the playoffs is if we win them all from here out. And somehow, they did. They went on a 9-game winning streak. During that run, they recorded 5 shutouts and allowed only 2 touchdowns in total. Opponents averaged fewer than 10 points per game, setting the new standard for the stingiest defense in AFC history at the time. The heart of that run was the defense. The soul of that defense was Jack Lambert. He wasn't just making tackles, he was setting a tone. When Lambert snarled at you, missing those 4 front teeth he lost in high school, he looked less like a football player, more like something out of a horror movie. That image defined him. He knew how to use it. That wasn't just a throwaway line, it was his philosophy. He believed football was a collision sport built on intimidation, and he played like every hit was personal. In 1976, he was named NFL Defensive Player of the Year. By then, he'd become the face of the Steel Curtain, the man offenses feared most. Teammates described him as fiery. Opponents called him crazy. Fans called him a warrior. But everyone agreed that when you lined up against Jack Lambert, you knew pain was coming. But by the early 80s, the dynasty was fading. The Steelers missed the playoffs in 1980 and 1981, fought back in 82 and 83, but could never get over the hump. Their last real push came in 1984 when they fell short in the AFC Championship. And that season, something else broke. Jack Lambert's body. A severe recurring case of turf toe kept him on the sidelines. For a linebacker who thrived on violence, speed, and leverage, it was the kind of injury that ended everything. At just 29 years old, the enforcer of Pittsburgh's defense decided he'd given all he could. He just walked away. He left the game the same way he played it, without hesitation. Over his career, he led Pittsburgh to 6 AFC Championship appearances and 4 Super Bowl wins, including a game-sealing interception against the Rams in Super Bowl 14. But beyond the rings, beyond the stats, what people remember is the intimidation. That toothless snarl, that wild-eyed stare, that feeling that Jack Lambert wasn't just trying to beat you, he was trying to break you. Ask any Steeler from that era and they'll tell you, Joe Green may have been the muscle of the Steel Curtain, but Lambert, he was the soul. When the pads came off, Jack Lambert didn't chase the spotlight. He walked away from the game at just 29 with a Hall of Fame career in his pocket and chose peace over fame. He moved back to Pennsylvania, bought land, and lived quietly with his wife Lisa and their children. No reality TV, no weekly NFL takes, no desperate comeback tours, just hunting, fishing, and family. In fact, Lambert became so private that even Pittsburgh locals joked he vanished into the woods. He turned down most interviews. When he did speak, it was usually short and sharp, like one line he gave reporters. Not interested in being a celebrity. I did my job. Now I just want to live my life. Even decades later, he stayed true to that. While many Hall of Famers embrace endorsements and cameras, Lambert preferred coaching youth baseball, watching his kids play sports, and keeping football in the rearview mirror. His legacy? He didn't just intimidate quarterbacks. He showed every fan that sometimes the toughest thing you can do is walk away. Jack Lambert wasn't just a linebacker, he was a presence. That toothless snarl, the wide eyes under that black helmet, the way he carried himself like the field belonged to him. 4 Super Bowls, 9 Pro Bowls, 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, a gold jacket in Canton, but numbers don't capture his legacy. He redefined the middle linebacker. No longer just a run stuffer, he was fast enough to cover, smart enough to command, and mean enough to set the tone for an entire defense. The Steel Curtain didn't just have strength, it had Jack Lambert's fire at its core. Myron Cope called him Dracula in Cleats. That image never faded. Even today, when you think of football toughness, you think of intimidation, his face still flashes first. Jack Lambert wasn't just one of the greatest linebackers. He became the very definition of what it means to play defense in the NFL. Now, I want to hear from you. Where do you rank Lambert among the greatest defenders ever? Drop your thoughts below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to like, subscribe, and stick around, because we've got plenty more football stories coming your way.